Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of KSP Resurgence. Last episode we finally finished all the interstellar travels we were doing here in the Chaos system. Now, it's finally time for us to be able to go home and bring all the science back. Now, the interstellar return journey is very similar to our departure. All I do is aim target and just burn for a long time actually. We have a whole lot of Delta V, and I do apologize for the flashing lights. It's just a really weird visual glitch I've been getting. I don't believe this will appear in future episodes of Resurgence just because all the future missions I've been doing have been thankfully free of that issue, at least for most of it. Anyway, it still takes a whole long time for the interstellar transfer because stars are actually really far apart, but Kerbal space program, they're still pretty close together, so I can return home pretty quickly. Now, after waiting a long couple years, the Kerbals actually get to return back to their home system. But before I get too close, I actually want to do a mid-course correction and just get a nice trajectory that has a very low inclination, just so I can rendezvous with Sanctar a little better. Now, the stock maneuver tool is not built for interstellar burns, because with all the Delta V, you're probably going to be holding the prograde marker a long time, so it's just best to eyeball it most of the time. Now, I prefer not to have my antimatter tanks full while coasting, because if I use Time Warp too much, the electric charge will bug out, and my antimatter tanks will think that there's no power, and then they'll start leaking antimatter, causing my ISV to explode, which is a very annoying glitch. You can get past it by adding a ton of reactors or enabling infinite electricity, but it's just super annoying. Actually, I think there's a Kerbal Space Program mod that prevents electric charge use during intense time warp, which I believe is a really good mod, but I think it just doesn't really solve the problem, just creates a weird fix. You know, after doing a somewhat scuffed to slowdown burn, we end up in a very weird orbit. Thankfully, it doesn't take too much Delta V to correct it and end up on a really nice orbit. Perfect for intersecting and visiting, returning to Sanctar. Now, we do get a little closer than I would like to Harmonia, which is a big star here, but I don't really care. It's still a rather circular orbit. Now, we're finally in orbit around Harmonia, so all the Kerbals here are not going back to interstellar space anytime soon. Except for their next mission, which will hopefully come out in a couple of episodes. But before I do that, there's a couple of things I want to do, like some orbital housekeeping first. Besides, there are some things that are really interesting close to our home. In fact, Kerbals have recently just started discovering space anomalies orbiting around Sanctar and other locations. So I will be visiting a couple of those this episode. These space anomalies are added by a Blueshift, which adds warp drives, which I will hopefully be getting to later in the series. But if you get close to one, you actually unlock a tech node. It's really good, especially since some of the Blueshift tech nodes are super expensive. In fact, I actually ended up accidentally flying by one, or actually it flew by me, because one time I was just minding my own business at a colony, and I just unlocked interstellar communications. I thought it was a weird Easter egg at first, but it turns out it was one of the Blueshift space anomalies, which is pretty cool. The anomalies can also be jump gates, which allow you to teleport from jump gate to jump gate, but I disabled those just because I didn't want to have that option available. I felt like it made the game too easy. Now, after a long voyage of several years, the Kerbals finally get to return home. Man, what a doozy. That mission was crazy. I mean, that whole grand tour took up like several episodes. Can't believe it's finally over. So, all the Kerbals won't be able to fit on the Helium SSTO to return home, so only the Science and a handful of Kerbals will be making the initial journey to return. Of course, I can't forget all the science, like hundreds and hundreds of science experiments that I did. Gotta store it in the space plane, which I'm actually surprised it actually fit in there. Now, of course, I gotta go into the command and the crew cabin. And then I gotta fly back home. Yeah, well, without any monopropellant, well, it's actually replaced with hydrazine in this mod pack. I can't really do any orbital maneuvers, so I just have to like use my reaction wheels to point away from the Excalibur just to be able to burn away and burn prograde so we can go back home. Despite being rather low on fuel, I actually do have plenty of Delta V. I also forgot to turn my fuel cell on, so I had to do that real quick because I ran out of electric charge because this engine runs on a whole lot of electricity. Thankfully that fuel cell is able to provide all that I need, and a lot more too. By the way, the plasma engine is from an Impulse Party if you're wondering. Now, I'm doing a rather weird entry trajectory here, just because I do want to try landing at the Kerbal Space Center. Now, thankfully, this landing was quite successful, and I actually did end up returning to the Kerbal Space Center. Although I did take a rather steep descent trajectory, the Kerbals didn't die, they didn't pass out, though I did lose a couple parts, those being the air brakes. Because I did forget to turn on my thermal gauges, and I would have disabled them had I known. I had to disable the thermal gauges because they kept turning on when I visited that really hot lava planet Refuse, which you actually saw a glimpse of earlier this episode. You know, even if I did miss the Kerbal Space Center, I could have flown back, because this spaceplane can fly indefinitely in an atmosphere, which is pretty cool, I must say. Of course, I gotta make a quick save, because if I crash this, I really don't want to have to do the whole re-entry over again. Here's the Kerbal Space Center in all of its glory. It's finally time to do the final landing of this mission. Not technically, I do have to send up a bigger space plane to do an orbital taxi mission to return the rest of the guys home, but this as a steel landing kind of marks the end of the Excalibur's very first mission. Now, despite almost losing control and going off the runway, we did actually slow down to a very nice landing. And look at all the gains, all the science. 12,000. Now, this is what an interstellar grand tour does. Take a minute to soak it in. And now I go to the research and development and realize that it's not nearly enough to unlock all the warp drives I want. This is when I really regretted not adding a laboratory to the Excalibur. Thankfully, this regret will be remedied by a couple of episodes, because the next mission Excalibur will perform will actually have a laboratory on it, so I will be getting a whole lot more science this next mission. Now, I did unlock some primitive warp drives there, but unfortunately I can't unlock any of the actual sizable ones that I actually want to use. So we're stuck with plain old regular propulsion first. Now, here we are launching helium yet again. Why exactly are we doing this? Well, the Kerbals actually discovered one of those space anomalies I was talking about earlier. Now, with Blueshift, space anomalies are actually somewhat easy to find because they always have U and K in their name. They always start with those 3 letters. So if you go into the tracking station with the Blueshift installed and find any of those unknown objects named that, you should probably go check them out. They'll save you lots of science, especially later in the game where science is by no means hard to find, it's just that everything's super expensive. Now, this space anomaly is in a rather weird position, because it's going to have an encounter with Krob, one of Sanctar's moons, and then it's going to have a gravity assist and get into a higher orbit. It's not going to go out of the Sanctar system or anything, it's just has a little bit of a weird orbit. Thankfully, the helium has lots of Delta V and can easily intersect with that. I really am proud of how the helium turned out. It's one of my favorite space planes. Well, I've designed some space planes that look really cool. In fact, if you've been to my Discord server, I actually have lots of previews of videos I actually recorded ages ago. Now, this video footage I think I recorded like a month or two ago, just because of how I record videos. I just play Kerbal a lot, and then I have a backlog of footage to edit, and then weekly I edit the video, and then I upload it. So this footage is quite old. I'm only voicing it over right now, actually. So, if you really want to see far into the future what I've got planned for my YouTube series, you should probably join my Discord server. Besides, they have crouch files too, so if you do want to give the Helion a nice flight, I would highly suggest joining it. Now, due to its rather inclined eccentric orbit, I do have to do a bunch of weird maneuvers to get a nice intersect. But eventually I do get a pretty close rendezvous. After using my RCS to finish up the burn and fine-tune my encounter. Actually, time warping, then I encounter the strange anomaly that has caught the eyes of the Kerbals. Though, of course, I do a little mid-course correction, just because I'm going to get really close. Thankfully, I actually have plenty of hydrazine to work with, unlike the Helion missions used with Excalibur. Because I kept using RCS fuel by accident whenever I used RCS on Excalibur, because I wanted to use a hydrogen RCS, but I kept ended up using hydrazine and ended up burning it all. I ended up unlocking some science nodes from that. And let's get a closer look at this weird space anomaly to see what it looks like. Now, it's unknown what actually created this space anomaly or how it came to being, but we believe it's artificial. Because normal space rocks probably wouldn't look like glowing green space tetrahedron with a bunch of stars on it. So I'm going to get one of my scientists out to investigate. Getting a nice close look at it, we can definitely conclude it's artificial in nature. I mean, after all, it is transmitting signals on advanced schematics how to build warp drives, so we can logically conclude that it is artificial, created by some alien race. Maybe it was the Kerbals. Besides, this is billions of years after the events of the stock Kerbal system, so who knows, maybe the Kerbals invented warp drives and then just simply forgot how to make them. I mean, it won't be out of the question, they have lost several homeworlds by now, according to the Beyond Helm /before/after Kerbin /Celestial Harmony continuity. Now, we did everything we wanted to do, and we saw the anomalies, so now it's time to return home. I do want to do another Kerbal Space Center landing, so I am time warping to a rather nice position to be able to do my retro burn. You know, this time we actually did end up landing back at the Kerbal Space Center. Actually, kind of starting to get the hang of these landings, especially with the Helion, since it can fly indefinitely in the atmosphere. Now, the Helion is definitely one of my favorite SSTOs. I've said this before, but it just performs flawlessly in almost any situation. Given the atmosphere it's flying in is thick enough, it can run in any atmosphere. I mean, if I landed this thing on a Galarka, or with that huge Hycean planet with a really thick atmosphere, it probably would perform extremely well. In fact, I might even be able to dip this into a gas giant, but then again, it might end up exploding due to thermal stress. Now, I did overshoot the Kerbal Space Center by a little bit, so I will have to fly backwards in order to return. Thankfully, I am still pretty close. We get to see some of the nice, beautiful islands and sandbars that Sanctar has to offer. All of the sandbars and islands on Sancta are actually green. Maybe they have some weird moss growing on them that likes sand. I'm really starting to get the hang of these space-playing Kerbal Space Center landings, but this is definitely not the first time I've done them. Just because in previous playthroughs I used space planes a lot and actually really got used to doing Space Center landings. I've also found that smaller space planes are a lot more controllable and therefore easier to land in a controlled site. Once again, we have another touchdown of the Helion and another successful mission under our belts. However, this is not the last time I'll see this spaceplane this episode. In fact, Kerbals have found another space anomaly, except to the Helion, which is basically the whole workhorse of the Nova Aerospace Space Agency, to go check it out. Now, I could have launched a rocket and done like a capsule mission instead, but like, why do that? It's a lot more expensive. Well, I mean, this isn't a career save, but my headcanon, it's a lot more expensive, a lot more time-consuming to build a whole rocket just to explore a weird space rock orbiting one of our moons. It's kind of impractical to do that when we have a space plane that's reusable that can easily do it, and probably do it 10 times without having to refuel. So, besides, I do want to see this space plane more, just because how cool it is. But I might be making some more variants of it in the future as we unlock more technologies. I might want to make a warp variant of it once I get the warp drives, but I've tried doing that in Sandbox, and it's just kind of hard to make a small warp ship that's also a single-stage orbit space plane. Just because I feel like warp ships are kind of hard to make in general with Blueshift, just because you need lots of graviolum and lots of warp coils in order to get somewhere. I could have used the Mark II warp ring, but that's kind of meant to like be left in orbit and docked to when you want to use it. Kind of like the warp rings from Star Wars. Now, doing a rendezvous is very easy. I've done tons of them on my channel so far. I always struggle to figure out what I want to talk about during these rendezvous. You know, we did end up actually flying by and rendezvousing with the space anomaly, but turned out it got me a node I didn't want. Well, it's a nuclear fuel systems. It gives me some uranium tanks. I'm pretty grateful that I got it, but I easily could have bought it with the science I had. And I would have preferred it unlocked a way more expensive node, like perhaps more warp drives. In fact, the whole reason I was exploring these space anomalies is just because I really wanted to unlock warp drives before I went interstellar, but unfortunately I couldn't do that, so Excalibur had to go do another standard interstellar mission. Now, I am glad I actually used Excalibur again, just because I felt like it wouldn't have been right to construct this massive, beautiful interstellar vehicle, use it for one mission, even though it was a massive mission, and just ditch it, never to be used again. Now, the Haze system, which is a brown dwarf from Cosmic Serenity, is my next interstellar destination that I want to visit. And it's not really a brown dwarf, it's more like a pink dwarf just because of how pink it is. It's actually still somewhat close, very similar in distance to the Chaos system. In fact, it's actually really close to that, so if I had to set up a colony, I can easily go between the two places. After I visit Chaos, I want to visit Anubis, which is a pulsar that's actually somewhat far away. So that's where I'm going to use warp drives. In fact, I actually had a live stream where I designed the warp ship. I did make a few changes since then, and I feel like it looks amazing. But I don't want to spoil the rest of the series. In fact, after I visit Anubis, I'm planning on ending KSP Resurgence. But I'm not ending the save file. I'm going to wait for Cosmic Serenity to get an update, and also Celestial Harmony to get updates, and then we're going to make a new series that continues from the save file. Now, this landing, I kind of scuffed it. I was too lazy to actually return to the Space Center, so I just decided, let's just land in the ocean. Now, I did end up tearing the wings off, but thankfully the crew members are unfazed. Now, this next mission aims to refuel the lithium tanks on Excalibur for our vacuum lander, and also take all the crew back home. Now, this is the Phoenix SSTO. I actually did swap out the engines with some more efficient Impulse Party ones. The Impulse Party ones are kind of overpowered because they work well in an atmosphere and in a vacuum. So they're really nice to use, especially on oxygenless worlds. They also provide really good thrust, so they're good for high gravity applications also. However, these two tiny little engines have very low TWR to propel this huge spaceplane. So I do have to end up doing a really weird burn and actually use some of the closed cycle options on the 4 atmospheric engines. I don't like using those engines in closed cycle just because they suck up so much hydrogen and they're very inefficient. So that's why I tend to never use them. In fact, if I had to use the closed cycle mode on the helium, it'd probably deplete all the hydrogen within 2 seconds. I'm not even joking. I actually ended up losing a mission and had to revert because of that. Now, another thing I should mention is that the Phoenix is kind of a death trap. I don't recall having issues flying ASEV or later Phoenix ASEV derived vehicles like the Phoenix. But this one, I had to relaunch it so many times because it just kept flipping over. Might have been the payload changing the center of mass. But it was just very hard to fly. Unfortunately, that difficulty might end up rearing its ugly face during re-entry. Once again, I don't have to do too much effort rendezvousing. I am more than capable of doing that, just because I'm really good at rendezvous. I used to struggle with them and actually crash out while doing rendezvous, but now I'm actually really good at them. Of course, I do have to wait a long time for Excalibur to load, just because it's 700 parts. Thankfully, I'm going to try to, in future missions, I'm going to try to use vehicles that have less parts. Like my warp ship, which I plan to call the Nebulon, will actually has currently 300 or 200 parts. So it's probably going to be a lot better to play with than Excalibur. But I'm pretty sure those triangular radiators on the sides of the fuel tanks might actually be contributing to that huge part count. I regret not using the Sterling graphene radiators just because those would have done the same shape, but would have taken up less parts. So I probably should have... next time I'll probably use those radiators and not stack all the ones from your Teos mods. Thankfully, docking is very easy. I just gotta make sure I stay aiming towards the docking port. And, here we are. I'm gonna take up TAC fuel balancer and actually empty the lithium tank in the service bay, as well as the one actually inside the service bay. And it's not really enough to refuel the tanker module of the Excalibur, but I mean, I'll fix that in a later video. And of course, I do have to take all the Kerbals. They've been stretching their legs in the gravity ring, but the 0.5 Gs of gravity offered by the artificial gravity just isn't really enough for the crew. They want to stretch their legs on Sanctar and actually get to experience living in an atmosphere again that's not artificial. These Kerbals have been cooped up in Excalibur for years. Despite the very, very, very spacious living, they want to go home. It's finally time to bring this Chaos System Grand Tour to an end. I'm very happy with how the Chaos System Grand Tour came. There's some very interesting locations, such as the Glacier's cryovolcanoes, Sublime's mushroom fields, and also the battlefields of Nostal. But unfortunately, all good things have to end, and we do have to return the crew in a very, very scuffed fashion. Almost killing them in the process, but thankfully I was able to regain control of the Phoenix crew vehicle. But unfortunately, I will have to land in the ocean yet again, just because I don't want to fly back to the Kerbal Space Center in this death trap of a vehicle. From this point on, I'm going to be trying to use helium-derived vehicles for all my crew transport needs. So, here we are landing in the ocean. And that will be the end of this mission and the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you all in the next one.